The stars looked different when you were making history. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood at the viewing port of the UES Liberty, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. Nexus Prime was supposed to be neutral ground, a place where different species could meet safely. Today, it would host the first meeting between humans and the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. Captain Lisa Ford checked the ship systems one more time. Everything had to be perfect for this moment. The Terran Federation had spent months preparing for this meeting. Every detail mattered when you were representing your entire species to an empire that ruled most of the galaxy. Danny Clark sat at his communications station running final tests on the translation software. The Zephyrians had sent basic language protocols weeks ago, but Danny wanted to be sure every word would be understood correctly. One wrong translation could mean the difference between peace and war. The Liberty docked at Nexus Prime without problems. The station was huge, bigger than any human structure. Long corridors led to the central meeting chamber where species from across the galaxy had signed treaties and trade agreements. Today, humans would join that list, or so they hoped. Ambassador Morrison walked through the station with his small team. Captain Ford stayed close, her hand never far from her sidearm. Danny carried the translation equipment and recording devices. Dr. Amy Chen brought her scientific instruments, ready to learn everything she could about Zephyrian technology. The meeting chamber was enormous. In the center sat a massive table surrounded by chairs designed for different species. The Zephyrian delegation was already waiting. Their leader, Supreme Commander Vextar, was tall and imposing with dark blue skin and silver markings that showed his rank. His eyes were cold as he watched the humans enter. Morrison approached the table with what he hoped was a friendly smile. "Greetings, Supreme Commander Vextar. I am Ambassador Jake Morrison, representing the Terran Federation. We are honored to meet with representatives of the Zephyrian Empire." Vextar did not return the smile. He looked at the humans like a scientist studying insects. "So these are the primitives from the third planet of System Sol. You have barely achieved faster than light travel, yet you request an audience with the Empire." The translator worked perfectly, but Morrison wished it had not. The Zephyrian's tone was clear even across species barriers. This was not going to be the friendly meeting they had hoped for. "We come seeking mutual understanding and cooperation," Morrison replied carefully. "Our species may be young in galactic terms, but we have much to offer. Our scientists have made remarkable advances in—" "Silence," Vextar interrupted. "You will listen. The Zephyrian Empire has ruled this galaxy for over 2,000 years. We have brought order to 400 worlds and their species. Some joined willingly. Others required persuasion." Dr. Chen activated her scanners discreetly, recording everything she could about the Zephyrian technology around them. The metal in their armor, the energy signatures from their devices, the way their ships were built. Every detail might be important later. Vextar continued speaking as if he was reading from a standard script. "Your world lies in a strategic location along important trade routes. The Empire requires immediate access to your system and colonization rights to your planet. Your species will be relocated to designated areas and integrated into Imperial society." Morrison felt his heart sink. This was not negotiation. This was conquest. "Supreme Commander, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. We are not seeking to join your empire. We hope to establish diplomatic relations as equals." The Zephyrian leader laughed, a sound like metal scraping against stone. Other members of his delegation joined in. "Equals? You species has existed in space for less than 100 of your years. The Empire has conquered civilizations older and more advanced than yours. What could primitives possibly offer us?" Captain Ford stepped forward slightly, her military training keeping her alert to every threat in the room. The Zephyrian guards carried weapons she had never seen before, energy weapons that could probably cut through their ship's armor like paper. We offer friendship, Morrison said firmly. We offer trade, knowledge sharing, and mutual defense. The galaxy is a big place. Surely there is room for cooperation rather than conquest. Vextar's expression turned cold. The galaxy belongs to those strong enough to take it. Your species has had its chance to develop properly. Now you will join the Empire or be removed. This is not negotiation. This is notification. Danny's equipment recorded every word, every gesture, every detail of the encounter. Back on Earth, people would need to know exactly what had happened here. I must respectfully decline your offer, Morrison said. The Terran Federation will not surrender its independence or allow colonization of our worlds. Then you have chosen the difficult path, Vextar replied. The Empire will give your species one standard galactic cycle to reconsider. Use this time to prepare your people for integration. Resistance will only increase the cost in lives. The meeting was over as the human delegation prepared to leave. Dr. Chen's scanners worked overtime, gathering intelligence on everything around them. The Zephyrians made no effort to hide their technology, confident that primitive humans could not understand or duplicate it. Walking back to their ship, Morrison felt the weight of his species' future pressing down on him. They had come hoping for friendship and found only an ultimatum. In 3 months, the Zephyrian Empire would come to Sol System expecting surrender. Instead, they would find something no other species had ever given them before, a fight they were not prepared for. 3 months had passed since the meeting at Nexus Prime. The Zephyrian First Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol System like a dark storm cloud, blotting out the stars. Admiral Rex Korthak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Imperial Dreadnought Dominion, and smiled at the sight before him. The human system looked exactly as expected. A small yellow star with several planets, a few space stations, and scattered mining operations in the asteroid belt. Primitive sensor readings showed basic defensive platforms around the third planet, nothing that would pose any threat to the might of the Imperial fleet. Korthak had conquered 17 star systems in his career. This would be the 18th, and probably the easiest. The species here called themselves humans, and they had foolishly refused the Empire's generous offer of peaceful integration. Now they would learn the price of defying Imperial will. "Communications officer," Korthak commanded. "Broadcast our standard surrender demands on all frequencies. Make sure these primitives understand what happens to species that resist the Empire." The message went out across the Sol System, transmitted in the human language that Imperial linguists had decoded from their primitive broadcasts. It was the same message the Empire had sent to hundreds of worlds before. Surrender immediately or face total destruction. Captain Lisa Ford stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and most advanced warship. Around her, the crew worked quietly at their stations, monitoring the massive alien fleet that had just arrived at the edge of their home system. The ship was silent except for the hum of electronics and the steady breathing of people who knew they were about to make history. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Jake Parker from the communications station, "we're receiving their surrender demands. Standard Imperial protocol, just like Dr. Chen predicted from her analysis of their previous conquests." Ford nodded. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The Zephyrians were following their established patterns, which meant the human response would catch them completely off guard. "Open a channel to the alien fleet," Ford ordered. "All frequencies, maximum power. I want every ship in their formation to receive this message clearly." The channel opened with a soft beep. Ford looked directly into the camera, knowing that her words would be recorded and studied by alien historians for generations to come. Her voice was calm and steady, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had prepared for this moment for months. "This is Captain Lisa Ford of the Terran Federation. You have entered our home system with hostile intent. We are giving you one warning and one chance. Turn your ships around and leave our space immediately, or face the consequences." "This is your only warning. Run!" The message transmitted across space at the speed of light, reaching the Zephyrian fleet in minutes. On the bridge of the Dominion, Admiral Korthak listened to the translation with growing amusement. His officers began laughing before the message finished playing. "Did they just threaten us?" asked Commander Zekar, Korthak's second in command. "A single primitive vessel is warning the Imperial fleet to retreat?" Korthak activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, you have just heard the funniest joke in galactic history. A species that has barely learned to leave their own planet is warning the Zephyrian Empire to run away." Laughter echoed across the fleet communication channels. Thousands of Imperial soldiers and officers found the human warning hilarious. Some ships began playing the message repeatedly for entertainment. Others started making jokes about primitive species that thought they could threaten the Empire. Back on Earth, President Nancy Walsh sat in the underground command center that had been built in secret over the past 3 months. General Pete Carter stood beside her, watching displays that showed the positions of every ship in the solar system. Both human and alien vessels appeared on the screens, but the Zephyrians could only see a fraction of what was really there. "Protocol 7 is active," General Carter reported. "All hidden platforms are powered up and ready. Sleeper ships have revealed their true configurations. Our people are in position throughout the system." President Walsh nodded grimly. "The warning has been given. When they ignore it, show them why humans survived long enough to reach the stars." Admiral Korthak had heard enough entertainment for one day. It was time to begin the conquest and add another easy victory to his record. He opened communications to his fleet commanders, ready to give the orders that would crush human resistance in a matter of hours. "All ships, assume attack formation. Begin bombardment of their defensive platforms. Standard Imperial protocol. Disable their infrastructure first, then demand surrender. If they still refuse, we will demonstrate what happens to species that defy the Empire." The massive Zephyrian ships began moving into position, their weapons charging with energies that could crack planets. Admiral Korthak felt the familiar satisfaction that came with overwhelming superiority. No species had ever resisted Imperial might for more than a few hours. In the asteroid belt, Captain Ben Rogers received the order he had been waiting for. The mining ship UES Prospector had spent months disguised as a simple ore hauler, but now it was time to reveal its true nature. Heavy armor plating slid away from hidden weapon ports. Massive railguns extended from concealed mountings. The ship that had appeared helpless was suddenly bristling with enough firepower to threaten capital ships. Similar transformations occurred throughout the Sol system. Cargo vessels revealed military-grade weapons. Space stations deployed defensive systems that had been carefully hidden. Mining platforms in the asteroid belt suddenly became fortress positions with overlapping fields of fire. Commander Helen Price led a squadron of small attack ships that had been hiding among the space debris near Jupiter. Her pilots had trained for months in unconventional tactics, learning to use asteroids and debris as cover, striking fast and disappearing before enemies could respond. Dr. Amy Chen worked frantically in her laboratory, putting the finishing touches on weapon systems designed specifically to exploit Zephyrian weaknesses. Every piece of intelligence gathered during the first meeting had been analyzed and turned into tactical advantages. The Zephyrians had made one critical mistake in their arrogance. They had shown the humans their technology, their tactics, and their standard procedures. They had given humanity 3 months to prepare, thinking that no primitive species could possibly threaten the mighty empire in such a short time. They were about to learn that humans were very good at learning from their mistakes, and even better, at making sure they never made the same mistake twice. Admiral Korthak gave the final order. "All ships, commence bombardment. Show these primitives the power of the Empire." The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. The first Zephyrian energy beams lanced across space toward what appeared to be a simple mining platform near asteroid designation Alpha 7. Admiral Korthak watched the display screens with satisfaction as his weapons locked onto the primitive, human installation. The energy blast should have vaporized the target completely. Instead, the mining platform's outer shell exploded outward in carefully controlled sections, revealing a massive fortress bristling with weapons. Point defense systems intercepted the Imperial energy beams while heavy railguns swiveled toward the attacking Zephyrian cruiser. The first salvo from the hidden fortress punched through the cruiser's shields like they were made of paper. What in the name of the Empire? Korthak stared at his tactical display as the cruiser Talon's Reach reported critical damage from what should have been a defenseless target. How are primitives penetrating our shields? Captain Ben Rogers smiled grimly as he watched the Zephyrian cruiser reel from his opening salvo. The UES prospector had spent months analyzing the energy signatures Dr. Chen had recorded at Nexus Prime. Every human weapon had been designed to exploit specific weaknesses in Imperial technology. "Target their power coupling nodes," Rogers ordered his weapons officer. "Dr. Chen's analysis shows their shields collapse if you hit the right frequency generators." The prospector's railguns fired again, sending tungsten slugs at tremendous velocity toward precise points on the Zephyrian ship. The alien vessel's shields flickered and failed as the projectiles struck exactly where Amy Chen had predicted they would cause maximum damage. Throughout the Sol system, similar scenes played out as the Zephyrians discovered that human space was not what it appeared to be. Mining ships revealed themselves as heavily armed gunboats. Cargo haulers deployed weapons that should not have existed on primitive vessels. Even small passenger shuttles suddenly became dangerous opponents. Commander Helen Price led her squadron of attack ships out of the asteroid field like a pack of wolves emerging from the forest. Her pilots had trained for months in unconventional warfare, learning tactics that no Imperial military academy had ever taught because no civilized species had ever used them. "Remember your training," Price broadcast to her squadron. "Hit fast, hit hard, and disappear before they can respond. These aliens fight like they're in a parade. Show them what real combat looks like." The human attack ships darted between asteroids, using the debris field as cover while launching surprise attacks on Zephyrian vessels. When the Imperial ships tried to pursue, the humans vanished into clouds of rock and metal, only to emerge somewhere else entirely for another lightning strike. Admiral Korthak watched his tactical display with growing confusion and anger. His fleet was taking damage from enemies that should not have been able to scratch Imperial armor. Worse, the human tactics made no sense according to established military doctrine. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the enemy vessels are not following standard engagement protocols. They refuse to maintain formation or engage in proper fleet combat. Their behavior is highly irregular." "Irregular?" Korthak demanded. "They are primitives with stolen weapons. Adjust our targeting systems and destroy them properly." But adjusting was not easy when the enemy refused to fight according to the rules. Commander Helen Price's ships attacked from unexpected angles, used civilian structures as weapons platforms, and employed tactics that seemed designed to cause maximum confusion rather than achieve clear military objectives. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Johnson commanded the Mars Orbital Defense Platforms, installations that appeared to be simple research stations to Zephyrian sensors. When the Imperial fleet moved to secure the outer planets, they discovered that even the smallest human outpost was a potential fortress. Johnson's platforms opened fire with weapons that should not have existed on such small installations. The Zephyrians found themselves under attack from directions they had not even considered threatening. Every human position seemed designed to support every other position, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the entire system into a death trap. "All Imperial ships concentrate fire on the largest enemy installations," Admiral Korthak ordered. "Destroy their primary defensive positions." The order was logical according to Imperial doctrine, but it failed to account for human tactical thinking. When Zephyrian ships focused their attacks on the obvious targets, Smaller human vessels appeared from hiding places throughout the system to attack the Imperial fleet from behind. Captain Tony Mitchell commanded the frigate UES Ranger, a ship that had taken severe damage in the opening minutes of combat. By Imperial standards, the vessel should have withdrawn or surrendered. Instead, Mitchell ordered his crew to continue fighting using whatever weapons they could improvise. When the Ranger's main guns failed, Mitchell used the ship's cargo bay to launch asteroids at enemy vessels. When the shields collapsed, he ordered ramming attacks against Zephyrian fighters. The concept of acceptable losses seemed foreign to human military thinking. "Sir," reported the Ranger's chief engineer, "we've lost main power, weapons are offline, and hull integrity is at 30%. Recommend immediate withdrawal." "Negative," Mitchell replied calmly. "We still have maneuvering thrusters and a cargo hold full of mining charges. Arm those explosives and plot a collision course with that Imperial destroyer." The Zephyrian captain of the destroyer Void Hunter watched in disbelief as the crippled human ship accelerated directly toward his vessel. No civilized species would sacrifice an entire ship and crew for such a minor tactical advantage. He ordered evasive maneuvers, but it was too late. The Ranger struck the destroyer amidships, its improvised explosives detonating on impact. The resulting explosion crippled both vessels, but the humans had achieved their objective of removing a major Imperial warship from the battle. Dr. Amy Chen worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the space station Unity, analyzing real-time battle data and developing new countermeasures. The intelligence she had gathered at Nexus Prime was proving invaluable, but the Zephyrians were learning too. She needed to stay ahead of their adaptations. "The Imperial ships are adjusting their shield frequencies," she reported to General Carter on Earth. "But I've identified 3 more vulnerability points in their armor design, transmitting new targeting data to all human vessels." Engineer Kyle Thompson had been reverse engineering captured Zephyrian equipment since the battle began. Working with salvage from damaged Imperial ships, he was developing new weapons and defenses faster than the enemy could respond to them. "I've cracked their communication encryption," Thompson reported. "We can now monitor all Imperial fleet communications and jam their coordination signals when necessary." Back on the flagship Dominion, Admiral Korthak faced a situation he had never encountered in decades of Imperial service. His fleet was not just taking casualties, it was being systematically outmaneuvered by enemies who refused to fight according to established rules of warfare. "Sir," his communications officer reported nervously, "Supreme Commander Vextar is requesting a status update on the conquest of the Sol system." Korthak stared at his tactical display, watching as another Imperial cruiser reported critical damage from human forces that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. How could he explain to the Supreme Commander that primitives were inflicting serious casualties on the Empire's finest fleet? "Tell the Supreme Commander that we are encountering unexpected resistance," Korthak replied carefully. "Request authorization to deploy additional forces." The request was a lie wrapped in military language. Korthak was not encountering resistance. He was losing a battle against an enemy that fought like no species the Empire had ever faced before. As the hours passed, the Zephyrian fleet found itself trapped in a system where every rock could hide. An enemy, every structure could be a weapon, and every human seemed willing to die rather than surrender. The easy conquest had become a nightmare of asymmetric warfare against opponents who treated the entire star system as their weapon. The battle had been raging for 18 hours, and Admiral Korthak was beginning to understand that something was fundamentally wrong with his assumptions about human warfare. Every species the Empire had conquered followed predictable patterns. They fought bravely at first, took acceptable casualties, then surrendered when defeat became inevitable. Humans seemed to operate under completely different rules. Captain Tony Mitchell's frigate had been declared destroyed 6 hours ago. Yet, it continued to appear on sensors, striking at Imperial supply ships with weapons that should not have functioned. The vessel was held together by emergency patches and determination, its crew refusing to acknowledge that their ship was technically dead. "Sir," reported Mitchell's tactical officer, "we've lost life support on decks 3 through 7. The reactor is running at 15% efficiency, and our weapons are firing ammunition we welded together from spare parts." Mitchell studied the tactical display, watching a Zephyrian supply convoy moving through the outer system. "Can we intercept them before they reach the main fleet?" "Probably. But, sir, one more hit will break this ship in half." "Then we better make sure we take some of them with us," Mitchell replied calmly. "All hands, prepare for ramming speed." The concept of acceptable losses seemed to be missing from human military doctrine entirely. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Johnson had been given orders to hold the Mars orbital platforms as long as possible, which Imperial tacticians interpreted as until casualties reach 30%. Instead, Johnson treated the order as until every human is dead or the enemy retreats. When Zephyrian assault ships finally broke through her outer defenses, Johnson did not request permission to withdraw. She activated the self-destruct sequence on Platform 7 while ramming it into the enemy formation. The explosion took out 3 Imperial ships and scattered the rest, buying precious time for reinforcements to arrive. Commander Helen Price had lost half her squadron in the asteroid field, but the survivors continued to harry Imperial ships using tactics that made no sense to Zephyrian commanders. Her pilots used mining explosives as weapons, turned cargo containers into missiles, and seemed willing to sacrifice their lives for the smallest tactical advantage. "Blue Leader, this is Command," came the voice from Earth. "You are authorized to withdraw to minimum safe distance." "Negative, Command," Price replied, watching another wave of Imperial fighters enter the asteroid field. "We still have ammunition, and the enemy is still in our system. Blue Squadron will continue to engage." The response exemplified something the Zephyrians had never encountered before. Other species fought to preserve their military forces for future battles. Humans fought as if this battle was the only thing that mattered in the universe. Dr. Amy Chen monitored the battle from her laboratory, but she was also analyzing something more disturbing than tactical data. The Zephyrians were learning to adapt to human weapons and tactics, but they seemed completely unable to understand human psychology. "General Carter," she reported to Earth Command, "the Imperial fleet is requesting reinforcements and trying to understand our casualty tolerance. Their computers keep calculating when we should surrender based on losses sustained." "What are their projections?" Carter asked. "According to their models, we should have surrendered 4 hours ago when casualties reached what they consider acceptable limits. They don't understand that we're not fighting to minimize losses. We're fighting to win." The difference was becoming clear to Imperial commanders as well. Admiral Korthak had consulted his tactical computers repeatedly, trying to determine when the humans would acknowledge defeat. Every algorithm indicated that the primitives should have requested ceasefire negotiations hours ago. Instead, human resistance seemed to intensify as their losses mounted. Damaged ships continued fighting until they were completely destroyed. Isolated stations kept transmitting defiance even when surrounded by overwhelming force. Individual humans seemed willing to die rather than accept defeat. Engineer Kyle Thompson had been working for 20 straight hours, reverse engineering Zephyrian technology and developing countermeasures in real time. His laboratory was filled with salvaged Imperial equipment, human weapons modified with alien components, and prototype devices that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. "I've got something new," Thompson reported to the fleet commanders. "The Zephyrians use quantum entanglement for their faster-than-light communications. If I can disrupt the quantum field, I can cut their fleet off from Imperial command." "How long do you need?" asked Captain Ford from the bridge of the Defiance. "Give me 2 hours and protection for my work site. I can build a jammer that will black out their communications across the entire system." The request was approved immediately, and human forces began concentrating around Thompson's position. The Zephyrians noticed the defensive buildup and assumed it protected something vital to human military operations. They were right. but not in the way they expected. Commander Sarah Vex-Tar of the Imperial Intelligence Division had been monitoring human communications since the battle began. What she discovered disturbed her more than the tactical situation. Human military communications contained elements that made no sense according to Imperial understanding of warfare. "Admiral," she reported to Korthak, "I believe we have misunderstood the nature of our enemy. These humans are not fighting a conventional war. They appear to be fighting what their language calls a total war, a conflict where the entire population participates in military operations." "Explain," Korthak demanded, though he was beginning to fear the answer. "Sir, their military communications include references to civilian manufacturing facilities producing weapons, non-military personnel operating defensive systems, and population centers that have been converted into fortress positions. The humans have turned their entire star system into a weapon." The implications were staggering. The Empire had conquered hundreds of species by defeating their military forces and occupying their worlds. If the humans had no distinction between military and civilian targets, conventional conquest became impossible. Back on Earth, President Nancy Walsh addressed the global population through emergency broadcasts. Her message was simple and direct. Every human facility, every resource, and every person was now part of the war effort. "Citizens of Earth and all human colonies," she announced, "we face an enemy that seeks to enslave our species. Today, we show them that humanity does not kneel to tyrants. Every factory will produce weapons. Every citizen will defend their home. Every human will fight until victory is achieved or our species falls." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Factories retooled to produce military equipment. Scientists shared their research freely to develop new weapons. Civilians volunteered for combat training and defensive operations. Admiral Korthak received reports that made the scope of human resistance clear. The planet Earth itself was revealing hidden defensive installations. Orbital elevators were deploying military platforms. Even space habitats designed for scientific research were launching attacks against Imperial ships. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "we have identified over 3,000 combat-capable installations in this system. Our original estimates indicated fewer than 50 military targets." 3,000? Korthak stared at the updated tactical display. "How is that possible? The humans appear to have militarized their entire civilization, sir. Every structure, every vessel, and every installation has potential military applications." The Admiral was beginning to understand why no imperial conquest had ever taken this long. Previous enemies had fought with their military forces while protecting their civilian populations. The humans had no civilian population. They had 3 billion potential soldiers supported by an industrial base that treated war production as a matter of species survival. Captain Lisa Ford watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Defiance, studying the patterns of Imperial fleet movements. The Zephyrians were still trying to fight a conventional war against an enemy that had abandoned conventional thinking entirely. "Communications," she ordered. "Transmit a message to the Imperial fleet. I want to make sure they understand what they're facing." The message was brief and direct. "You came here expecting to fight our military. Instead, you are fighting our entire species. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. We do not accept defeat. Leave our system now or learn what desperation can accomplish." Admiral Korthak stood before the massive holographic display in his command center, staring at tactical readouts that made no sense according to Imperial military doctrine. His fleet had been fighting primitives for 36 hours and was still taking casualties. The conquest that should have taken less than a day was becoming a disaster that would haunt his career forever. "Sir," reported Commander Zekhar, "we have lost 17 ships to enemy action. Casualties are approaching unacceptable levels for a minor conquest operation." Korthak's jaw tightened with frustration and growing desperation. "Unacceptable levels? We are the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. We do not retreat from primitives who barely understand space travel. What are your orders, sir?" The Admiral made a decision that would change everything. Prepare the planet killer torpedo. Target their moon as a demonstration of Imperial power. When these humans see what happens to celestial bodies that defy the Empire, they will surrender. The planet killer weapon was the Empire's ultimate threat, a device capable of cracking moons and devastating planets. It had never failed to break enemy resistance. Surely even stubborn humans would surrender when faced with the destruction of their home moon. Commander Alex Turner monitored the Imperial fleet from his hidden command post in the asteroid belt. His sensors detected the energy buildup aboard the Zephyrian flagship immediately. The signature was unmistakable. They were preparing to use their most powerful weapon. "All stations, this is Asteroid Command," Turner broadcast on the secure human frequency. "The aliens are charging their planet killer. Activate swarm protocol immediately." Across the Sol system, thousands of objects that had appeared to be space debris suddenly came to life. The swarm protocol was humanity's deepest secret, a network of automated defense drones that had been disguised as asteroid fragments, space, junk, and equipment debris. Linda Hayes had programmed the artificial intelligence systems that controlled the drone network, working 18 hours a day for 3 months to create the most sophisticated automated defense system ever built. Each drone was small, nearly invisible to Imperial sensors, but together they formed a web of destruction that could overwhelm any targeting system. "Swarm network is active," Hayes reported from her underground facility on Earth. "Tracking the Imperial flagship. All drones are converging on target." The Zephyrian weapons officer aboard the Dominion completed the targeting sequence for the planet killer torpedo. "Sir, weapon is charged and ready. Target locked on the human moon." "Fire," Korthak ordered. The massive torpedo launched from the Imperial flagship, its destructive payload sufficient to crack the human moon into fragments. But before it could travel 1,000 kilometers, space around the Zephyrian fleet suddenly filled with thousands of small objects moving at incredible speed. The drone swarm descended on the Imperial ships like angry insects. Each individual drone was tiny, but they attacked in coordinated groups that overwhelmed point defense systems. Explosions blossomed across Zephyrian hulls as the hidden weapons revealed their true purpose. "Sir, we are under attack by unknown weapons," reported the tactical officer aboard the Dominion. "Detecting massive swarm of small craft, origin unknown." Korthak watched his tactical display as hundreds of red contact symbols surrounded his fleet. "Where did they come from? Our sensors showed no enemy forces in this area." "Unknown, sir. The objects appear to have been dormant until now. They were camouflaged as space debris." The revelation was staggering. The humans had not just militarized their obvious installations. They had weaponized empty space itself. Every piece of debris, every asteroid fragment, every discarded component could be a hidden weapon waiting to activate. Dr. Amy Chen monitored the battle from her laboratory, but her greatest contribution was not weapons or tactics. It was intelligence. The data she had gathered during the first diplomatic meeting was revealing secrets the Empire thought were safe. "General Carter," she reported to Earth Command, "I'm detecting quantum communication signatures from the Imperial fleet. They're calling for reinforcements and reporting the situation to their home command. Can you intercept their communications?" "Better than that," Chen replied with a grim smile. "I can send them false information. The communication protocols I recorded at Nexus Prime include Imperial military codes. I can make their own command structure work against them." Within minutes, false reports began flowing through Imperial communication networks. Zephyrian Command received intelligence indicating that the Sol system contained advanced alien technology, that human weapons were based on unknown scientific principles, and that the species posed a threat to Imperial security. The drone swarm continued its devastating attack on the Imperial fleet, while ground-based installations revealed their true capabilities. What the Zephyrians had identified as simple research stations began launching attacks with weapons that matched Imperial technology. Captain Gary Foster led the defense of Earth's surface installations, coordinating with civilian militias that had trained for this exact scenario. When Zephyrian assault troops attempted to land and secure strategic positions, they discovered that the entire human population had become a military force. Remember your training, Foster broadcast to militia, units worldwide. These aliens expect conventional military resistance. Give them something they've never seen before. The Imperial ground forces found themselves fighting an enemy that used knowledge of local terrain, improvised weapons, and tactics that seemed designed to cause maximum confusion. Human defenders attacked from directions that made no tactical sense, used civilian infrastructure as military assets, and seemed to know exactly where Imperial equipment was vulnerable. Engineer Kyle Thompson's quantum communication jammer finally came online, cutting the Imperial fleet off from their command structure. Suddenly isolated in hostile space, Admiral Korthak found himself fighting a battle with no support and no intelligence about enemy capabilities. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we have lost contact with Imperial Command. The quantum entanglement link has been severed. How is that possible? The humans do not have quantum communication technology." "Unknown, sir, but we are effectively isolated until the link can be re-established. The isolation was psychological as well as tactical. For the first time in Imperial history, a Zephyrian fleet was completely cut off from the Empire that had seemed invincible for millennia. Captain Lisa Ford chose this moment to broadcast the message that would be remembered throughout Galactic history. Her transmission reached every ship in the Imperial fleet, delivered in perfect Zephyrian language that demonstrated how thoroughly humans had studied their enemy. "Admiral Korthak and forces of the Zephyrian Empire," Ford began, her voice calm and confident. "You came to our system expecting to fight primitives. Instead, you have encountered something your empire has never faced before, a species that refuses to accept defeat." The message continued, each word carefully chosen for maximum psychological impact. "We learned everything about you in 3 months. We prepared everything you see in 3 months. We turned our entire star system into a weapon in 3 months. This is what humans do when we have time to prepare." Ford paused, letting the implications sink in before delivering the final warning. "You have seen nothing yet. Leave our space now, or discover what else we have created." The transmission ended, leaving the Imperial fleet in stunned silence. The implications were terrifying. If humans could accomplish this much in 3 months, what could they do with more time? Admiral Korthak stared at his tactical display, watching as his fleet took casualties from enemies that appeared from nowhere and disappeared before retaliation was possible. For the first time in his career, he began to consider the possibility that the Empire might lose a battle. The thought was almost too terrible to contemplate, but the evidence was undeniable. The primitives had turned their star system into a death trap, their entire population into soldiers, and their supposed weakness into strength. They had done the impossible. They had made the Empire afraid. The battle had raged for 3 days when Captain Ben Rogers emerged from the outer reaches of the Sol system with ships that should not have existed. The vessels appeared on Imperial sensors like ghosts materializing from the void, their signatures. Unlike anything in Zephyrian military databases, Admiral Korthak watched the new contacts approach his battered fleet with growing dread. Where did those ships come from? Our long-range sensors detected no human forces beyond this system. "Unknown, sir," reported his tactical officer. "The vessels appear to be of human design, but their technology readings are impossible. They show energy signatures that match our own capital ships." Captain Rogers commanded the lead vessel, a ship that bore little resemblance to the mining vessel he had used earlier in the battle. The UES Vengeance was humanity's greatest secret, the flagship of a shadow fleet that had been built in hidden facilities throughout human space. "This is Captain Rogers to all Imperial vessels," he broadcast on open channels. "You were told to leave our space. You chose to ignore that warning. Now you face the consequences of underestimating humanity." The Shadow Fleet spread into attack. Formation, revealing ships designed with technology that combined human innovation with captured Imperial equipment. Dr. Amy Chen's intelligence had been used to create vessels specifically designed to fight the Zephyrian Empire. Captain Ruth Baker commanded the UES Retribution, a destroyer that mounted weapons reverse-engineered from Imperial technology but improved with human engineering. Commander Steve Clark led a squadron of fighters that used Imperial propulsion systems but human tactics. All ships, this is Admiral Korthak, the Zephyrian commander, broadcast to his fleet. Concentrate all fire on the new enemy vessels. Destroy them before they can coordinate with the system defenders. But coordination had already begun. Captain Lisa Ford's tactical brilliance had turned the Sol system into a carefully orchestrated trap that grew more dangerous with each passing hour. The arrival of the Shadow Fleet was not reinforcement. It was the final piece of a plan that had been months in the making. The human ships attacked with precision that devastated Imperial formations. Each vessel struck at exactly the right moment, targeting specific weaknesses that had been identified through days of combat analysis. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting enemies who knew their technology better than they did. Supreme Commander Vextar received reports aboard his flagship, at the edge of Zephyrian space, that challenged everything he believed about Imperial superiority. The conquest of a primitive species had become a military disaster that threatened the Empire's reputation throughout the galaxy. Admiral Korthak reports the loss of over half his fleet, his intelligence officer explained. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities that exceed our initial estimates by several orders of magnitude. Vextar studied the tactical reports with growing alarm. How is this possible? These primitives achieved faster-than-light travel less than a century ago. Sir, our analysts believe the humans represent something unprecedented in galactic history. They appear to have developed their entire civilization around the concept of warfare. Every aspect of their society contributes to military capability. The implications were staggering. Other species viewed war as an unfortunate necessity, maintaining separate military and civilian populations. Humans seem to treat war as a natural extension of their existence, with no meaningful distinction between soldiers and citizens. Captain Tony Mitchell's heavily damaged frigate continued to fight alongside the Shadow Fleet, its crew refusing to acknowledge that their ship was held together by determination and spare parts. The vessel had been declared destroyed multiple times, yet it kept appearing to strike at Imperial supply lines. "Sir," reported Mitchell's chief engineer, "we've now lost everything except life support and maneuvering thrusters. The weapons are completely gone." "Can we ram something important?" Mitchell asked calmly. "There's an Imperial supply convoy heading for their main fleet. If we time it right, we could take out their ammunition ship. Plot an intercept course. Let's show these aliens what humans do when we run out of conventional options." The sacrifice missions were becoming a pattern that terrified Zephyrian commanders. Humans seemed willing to trade individual ships and lives for tactical advantages that made no sense according to Imperial cost-benefit calculations. Engineer Kyle Thompson had been monitoring Imperial communications since his jammer came online, and what he discovered changed the strategic situation completely. The Zephyrians were not just losing ships, they were losing confidence in Imperial invincibility. "General Carter," Thompson reported to Earth Command, "I'm intercepting communications between the Imperial fleet and their home command. They're requesting permission to withdraw." Withdraw? Carter couldn't hide his surprise. "The mighty Zephyrian Empire wants to retreat from primitives?" "It's more than that, sir. They're reporting that humans represent a new type of threat that Empire doctrine cannot handle. They're recommending immediate cessation of hostilities." The recommendation represented the first time in Imperial history that a fleet commander had requested retreat from a technologically inferior enemy. The precedent would send shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Dr. Amy Chen chose this moment to deliver the intelligence coup that would end the battle. Using Imperial communication codes she had recorded months earlier, she sent a message directly to Supreme Commander Vextar that appeared to come from Admiral Korthak. Supreme Commander, the false message read, human military capabilities exceed all previous estimates. Enemy demonstrates ability to adapt and counter Imperial technology in real time. Recommend immediate diplomatic solution before losses become catastrophic. The message included tactical data that showed human weapons designed specifically to defeat Imperial defenses, evidence of a shadow fleet that matched Imperial capabilities, and intelligence indicating that other galactic species were monitoring. The conflict with great interest. Supreme Commander Vextar faced an impossible decision. He could send reinforcements to Sol system and risk exposing Imperial weakness to potential enemies throughout the galaxy, or he could accept the first military defeat in Imperial history. The choice became clear when additional reports arrived, indicating that other species were indeed watching the conflict. If the Empire appeared vulnerable, centuries of careful conquest could unravel as subject worlds began to question Imperial invincibility. Admiral Korthak received new orders that he had never expected to see: negotiate immediate ceasefire with human forces, establish diplomatic contact for discussion of mutual coexistence. Empire authorizes recognition of human territorial sovereignty. The orders represented a complete reversal of Imperial policy, but Korthak was too relieved to question them. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by enemies who fought like no other species in galactic history. Open a channel to the human fleet, Korthak ordered. Request immediate dialogue with their commanding officer. Captain Lisa Ford received the Imperial surrender request with quiet satisfaction. The battle had cost humanity dearly, but it had achieved something unprecedented. The Zephyrian Empire was asking for peace terms. "This is Captain Ford," she responded to the Imperial request. "You may approach under flag of truce for surrender negotiations." "We do not surrender," Korthak replied quickly. "We request dialogue regarding mutual withdrawal and coexistence." "Admiral," Ford's voice was calm but firm. "You came to our system demanding our surrender. You attacked our home. You tried to destroy our moon. There will be no mutual anything. You will surrender unconditionally, or you will be destroyed completely." The ultimatum was delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who had the tactical advantage and knew it. The Zephyrian Empire, masters of the galaxy for 2 millennia, was being dictated terms by a species they had dismissed as primitives. Ambassador Jake Morrison arrived to handle the formal surrender negotiations, the same diplomat who had tried to establish peaceful relations months earlier. The irony was not lost on either side. "Supreme Commander Vextar," Morrison addressed the Imperial leader via quantum communication. "Humanity offers the Zephyrian Empire the same terms you offered us. You may join our sphere of influence as junior partners, or you may face continued military action." The role reversal was complete. The empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds was being offered terms by species they had intended to enslave. Vextar's response was carefully worded but clear. The Zephyrian Empire acknowledges human territorial sovereignty and requests formal diplomatic relations based on mutual respect and equality. It was surrender in everything but name, and everyone involved knew it. Captain Rogers transmitted the final message that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "To all species monitoring this conflict, the Zephyrian Empire came to end our home system and gave us one warning to surrender. We gave them one warning to leave. The difference is, we meant it." The epilogue to the battle was written by historians across the galaxy as news of the Imperial defeat spread to every civilized world. For the first time in recorded history, a technologically superior empire had been defeated by a species that refused to accept the impossibility of victory. Other species began to question their own subjugation to Imperial rule.